Welcome to the Podcast Lab, your go-to space for raw conversations, curious questions, and inspiring stories from around the world. Whether you're here to learn, laugh, or just listen in, this is where ideas take shape and voices come alive. Ready to dive into fresh perspectives and thought-provoking discussions? Let's get started. This is the Podcast Lab. Subscribe now and never miss an episode.
Okay, so we're diving into some pretty interesting stuff today. Our listeners have sent us some sources on conspiracy theories. It's like a whole world of hidden truths and shadowy figures. We're going to try to figure out what's real and what's, well, a little out there.
You know, it's funny, right? It seems like we're living in a golden age of conspiracy theories. Everywhere you look, there's another theory about, like, secret societies or government cover-ups.
Yeah, and some of them are pretty wild, like that whole Roswell incident thing. Back in '47, this mysterious crash in New Mexico, everyone was convinced it was a UFO.
Roswell. It's like the granddaddy of all alien conspiracy theories. What's fascinating is that even after all these years, it still holds up, you know? It just captures our imaginations.
It's true. Like, the government said it was just a weather balloon, but some of the eyewitness accounts, they talked about this weird debris, like nothing they'd ever seen before.
Exactly. And then you've got those declassified government files with all the redacted sections. It just makes you wonder what they were trying to hide.
It's definitely suspicious. And some of those descriptions of the debris, like this super strong, lightweight material, it just doesn't sound like anything you'd find on a weather balloon.
Right. It's like the more you learn about Roswell, the more questions you have. Okay, but let's switch gears for a second. What about the moon landing hoax? That one's been around forever.
Oh, man, that's a classic. People point to all sorts of evidence, like the flag waving in the wind, even though there's no atmosphere on the moon.
Yeah, that waving flag is a good example of how conspiracy theories work. It seems fishy at first, but there's a perfectly logical explanation. The flag had a telescoping pole to make it stand out, and the way it moved was just due to the way it was unfurled and the low gravity.
So it's not actually waving in the wind?
Nope. It's all about the physics of the situation. Oh, and another thing people bring up is the lack of stars in the photos. It's like, if they were really on the moon, wouldn't the stars be super visible?
Yeah, you'd think so.
Well, here's the thing. The lunar surface is really reflective, and the sunlight was so bright that it basically washed out the fainter light from the stars. It's kind of like when you're in a city at night, you don't see as many stars because of all the light pollution.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's all about context, huh? What might seem strange at first can have a totally normal explanation when you look at the science.
Exactly. But even with all the evidence, the moon landing hoax is still out there. And I think it shows how deeply ingrained some of these beliefs are. It's almost like people would rather believe in a massive cover-up than accept the incredible feat of landing on the moon.
Maybe it makes the world feel a little less chaotic, you know?
Yeah.
Like if something as huge as the moon landing could be faked, then anything is possible.
I think there's something to that. Conspiracy theories often give people a sense of control in a world that can feel very unpredictable. And speaking of control, we got to talk about the Illuminati.
Ah, yes. The puppet masters behind everything, right? Our listeners are really curious about this one. Like, Are there really these powerful secret societies controlling world events?
Well, the image of the Illuminati as we know it is mostly a modern myth. But the interesting thing is it's based on a real historical group. The Bavarian Illuminati was a secret society in 18th century Germany.
Wait, so there really was a group called the Illuminati?
There was, but they weren't nearly as powerful as the conspiracy theories suggest. They were actually only around for about 10 years before they were shut down, and their impact on history was pretty limited.
So it's kind of like we took this real but kind of insignificant group and turned them into the symbol of shadowy power and control.
Exactly. And the idea of the Illuminati, this hidden group pulling the strings, it taps into our fears about who's really in charge. It's easier to believe in this all-powerful enemy, even fictional one, than to grapple with the complexities of real-world power structures.
Right, like it's more comforting to have a clear villain, even if that villain doesn't really exist. Okay, so we've got aliens, faked moon landings, and secret societies. But what about a conspiracy theory that turned out to be true? Because sometimes reality is stranger than fiction.
Ah, you must be talking about MK Ultra. Now, this is where things get creepy. We're not talking about speculation anymore, but an actual CIA program that came to light back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, MK Ultra. The CIA trying to control people's minds. That one always gives me the chills. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, but it really happened. The CIA was experimenting with all sorts of mind control techniques, LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation. They were trying to develop a truth serum or ways to manipulate enemy agents.
And the scariest part is that they were doing these experiments on people without their consent.
Totally. MKUltra is a dark chapter in history, and it shows how easily power can be abused, even by organizations that are supposed to protect us.
It definitely makes you think twice about what might be going on behind closed doors. So in this case, the conspiracy theorists were right. And it makes you wonder, what else might be hidden from us?
That's a question we all have to grapple with. MKUltra is a reminder that even the craziest sounding conspiracies can have a kernel of truth. And it's up to us to be critical thinkers, to question authority, and to never stop searching for the truth.
It's a good reminder that we can't just blindly trust what we're told. We have to be willing to dig deeper and ask tough questions.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another important point. Why are we so drawn to these theories in the first place? What is it about the human psyche that makes us want to believe, even when the evidence is flimsy?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's one we need to explore further. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, but we've barely scratched the surface of this whole world of conspiracy theories.
Welcome back. So last time, we left off talking about why people believe in these conspiracy theories. It's a question that's puzzled people for a long time.
It is. It's like what makes us so drawn to these alternative explanations, even when they seem, kind of far-fetched.
Right. Well, psychologists have actually done a lot of research on this, and it turns out there are some pretty interesting factors at play. One of the biggest is this thing called patternicity. Basically, it's our tendency to see patterns and connections even where they don't really exist.
So, our brains are always trying to make sense of the world, even if it means connecting dots that shouldn't be connected.
Exactly. And when we're faced with something that's scary or confusing, like a global pandemic or a political scandal, our brains try to find an explanation. Conspiracy theories often provide that. They offer a simple, easy-to-understand narrative that makes the world feel a little less chaotic.
Right. Instead of accepting that things are random and unpredictable, it's more comforting to believe that someone or something is in control, even if that someone is a secret society or a group of lizard people.
Exactly. Conspiracy theories give us a sense of order and control in a world that can feel very out of control. And another thing that plays a role is mistrust in authority. When we lose faith in institutions, the government, the media, scientists, we're more likely to embrace alternative explanations.
That makes sense, especially these days when it feels like everyone has an agenda. It's hard to know who to trust.
And that's where the internet comes in. Social media and online forums have created these echo chambers where conspiracy theories can spread like wildfire. People find communities that reinforce their beliefs, and it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, it's easy to get sucked into those rabbit holes online. You start reading one article to another, and before you know it, you're convinced that the Earth is flat or that birds aren't real.
It's wild, right? But here's the thing. Not all conspiracy theories are harmless. Some of them can have real-world consequences, like leading people to distrust vaccines or reject scientific evidence.
Right. That's definitely a concern. So what can we do about it? How do we navigate this world of conspiracy theories without getting lost in the maze?
Well, I think the first step is to be aware of our own biases. We all have them, and they can influence how we interpret information. If we already distrust the government, we're more likely to believe a conspiracy theory that paints them in a negative light.
So we need to be honest with ourselves about our own preconceived notions and be willing to question them.
Exactly. And we also need to be critical thinkers. Don't just accept everything you read online at face value. Do your own research, check multiple sources, and look for evidence.
It's like being a detective, right? You have to gather all the clues before you can solve the mystery.
Exactly. And here's another important tip. Be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers. Real knowledge is about nuance and complexity, not black and white thinking. If someone's presenting a really simplistic view of a complex issue, chances are they're not giving you the whole picture.
So instead of looking for easy answers, we should embrace the messiness and uncertainty of the world.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but yeah, I think that's a good approach. The world is a complicated place, and there are rarely easy answers.
And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to not have all the answers.
I think so. It's like that saying, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. That's the beauty of knowledge. It's a journey, not a destination.
I like that. So instead of getting bogged down in conspiracy theories, we should focus on cultivating critical thinking skills, doing our own research, and being open to new information, even if it challenges our beliefs.
Exactly. It's about embracing the process of learning and understanding that we'll never have all the answers, and that's okay.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about, the ins and outs of conspiracy theories. But I'm kind of curious, what's the bigger picture here? What does our fascination with these theories say about us as a society?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it speaks to this underlying sense of unease that a lot of people are feeling these days. We're living in a time of rapid change and uncertainty, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Right, everything's changing so fast. Technology, politics, the environment, it can feel like the world's spinning out of control.
Totally. And when people feel like they've lost control, they often look for someone or something to blame. Conspiracy theories provide that. They offer a simple explanation, a clear enemy, a way to make sense of a world that feels increasingly chaotic.
It's like if there's a secret cabal pulling the strings, then at least someone's in charge, right? Even if that someone is evil.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling powerless. It's also about this erosion of trust that we see happening in a lot of societies.
People don't trust the government, the media, big corporations. It's like everyone's got an agenda.
Yeah. And when trust breaks down, it creates a vacuum that conspiracy theories can easily fill. It's if you don't trust the official narrative, you're more likely to believe an alternative explanation, even if that explanation is, pretty out there.
So what do we do? How do we rebuild that trust and address the underlying anxieties that are driving people to these conspiracy theories?
That's the million-dollar question. I think it starts with open and honest communication. We need to create spaces where people can share their concerns, even if those concerns seem, a little fringe.
So instead of dismissing people who believe in conspiracy theories, we should try to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. Because even if we don't agree with their conclusions, we can still learn from their perspective. It can help us identify blind spots in our own thinking and, maybe even spark some positive change.
That's a great point. Sometimes conspiracy theories can be a sign that something's not working in society. They can point to areas where we need to do better, like improving transparency in government or addressing inequality.
Right. So instead of just focusing on debunking the theories themselves, maybe we should also focus on addressing the root causes that are making those theories so appealing in the first place.
I think that's a great way to frame it. So basically, we need to cultivate critical thinking skills, be willing to challenge our own beliefs, and have open and respectful conversations, even when they're tough.
Exactly. And, maybe most importantly, we need to remember that we're all in this together. We're all trying to make sense of a complex and often confusing world.
And sometimes the best way to do that is to listen to each other, even when we disagree. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap things up. It's been a fascinating journey exploring this whole world of conspiracy theories.
It has. And I hope our listeners have learned a few things along the way about the nature of belief, the importance of critical thinking, and maybe even a little bit about themselves.
And hey, even if you don't buy into any of the theories we discussed, hopefully, this deep dive has made you think a little differently about the world and the information you encounter every day. Thanks for joining us.